My name my name is Emma Perry, and I'm a fellow working at the City of Portland Sustainability Office. And this is our third and final summer series webinar around Landcare. And today we'll be hearing from Andrea Berry from the Wild Seed Project. She'll be talking about building a biodiverse and climate resilient yard and how we can do that here in Portland. So I'll hand it over to Andrea when she's ready.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks so much for joining us today, this afternoon. I am really thrilled to be walking you through building a biodiverse and climate resilient yard with a real emphasis on some simple action steps. So we're going to walk through who I am, what Wild Seed Project is. We'll talk about why building a biodiverse and climate resilient yard is important. And then we'll walk through a whole bunch of steps and things that you can really truly do at home, where you live, where you work, where you learn, and where you play. So let's jump in. Before we fully start to talk through this presentation, I do want to pause and read a land acknowledgement that Wild Seed Project feels very strongly about. Wild Seed Project is located within ancestral Wabanaki territory, now called Maine. We recognize the inherent sovereignty of the tribes of the Wabanaki, the people of the dawn, the Abenaki, Holton Band of Maliseet Indians, Mi'kmaq Nation, Penobscot Nation, and Passamaquoddy tribe. We support their continued work for justice, self-determination, and decolonization. The work of Wild Seed Project is necessary precisely because of the ongoing violence of settler colonialism, the exploitative practices of European colonizers, which continue to this day, are directly responsible for the displacement of the native plants that form the foundation of our local food webs that we are working to restore. So what does it mean to build and rebuild reciprocal relationships with people, plant, fungi, soil, water, air? Re-establishing resilient ecosystems in which all forms of life can thrive is one piece of deconstructing a colonial legacy. As we do our work at Wild Seed Project, we are clear. This knowledge and information did not start, nor will it end with us. The resources we share are gathered from many teachers, both human and non-human, and we encourage you to learn more about the historical and present-day relationships of Indigenous communities to the places where you live, and to join us in supporting Indigenous-led efforts to protect land, water, plants, and the creatures among us. Thank you. And thank you for allowing that to be part of the context of why we're all here and why we do this work. So, as we get started in this conversation, I think it's really helpful for you to hear about who I am. So why am I here talking to you today? What is my background in this conversation? Because while I am Wild Seed Project's executive director, what I'm not is a horticulturist or even an ecologist as trained by schooling. But what I am is a mom and a person who lives in this society, in this culture, and in this weather and environment that we have. So I got involved with Wild Seed Project just a little over 2 years ago, and some years before that, but 2 years ago when this opportunity arose to think about where I wanted to be in my life and in my role, I had a really powerful conversation with my daughter, who you see here. Her name is Cora, and when she was little, the thing that she was absolutely the most scared about was climate change and the planet that she was inheriting. She would have these massive nightmares, and like while I was growing up, I was having nightmares about heights and spiders, and my kid was having nightmares about what this weather was going to be, what she was going to have to live through as she grew. And so one of the things that we first started to do when she was little was garden together. And this middle picture here is a picture of my backyard and embracing the plants that not only for a while that we would buy at a nursery and bring over to our yard, but realizing that we could be growing plants that were native and indigenous to the place where we were, and that the biggest part of joy for us was seeing not only the flowers, which are obviously gorgeous, but the life that was living inside and among and within those flowers and fueled by those plants and flowers. And you've got this photo here on the other end, which is this opportunity for my kid, who has always like reluctantly gardened with me, but who is now full on psyched and involved in the work of Wild Seed Project, because for her, this is a place where she feels like she can actually make a change, a real substantial change in her backyard with her community at her school. And that for me, that's why I'm here as well, because these are truly small things that we can all do to build our response and build our resilience against a changing climate. So when that's a little bit about me, but it's important for you to also know about Wild Seed Project. So Wild Seed Project is a nonprofit organization focused on returning and growing plants and populating those plants on the Maine landscape and really far beyond that. And the way that we do that focus on native plants is really a three-pronged approach. So the core of what we do is seed stewardship. Seed is right there in our name. And we know it's one thing to buy plants at a plant sale or at a nursery or to see them out in the wild, but we think it's really empowering and critical that we all learn how to actually grow native plants from seed. And so we feel like this is an opportunity to teach everyone that we know, and I am sure all of you will be invited to join us in doing winter sowing. So in sowing native seeds in ways that mimic what actually happens in nature to create huge amounts of native plants to build that biomass and to get that into our landscape. We also do our work through nature-based education. And so this middle picture is about our work in learning by doing. So it's definitely wonderful that I'm here talking with you. I'm really excited about that. But the bread and butter of doing this work is actually getting your hands dirty, literally getting your hands dirty. And so we believe in doing hands-on education where we teach people how to sow seeds, how to identify native plants in the environment, and what you can do to manage invasives and to transform landscapes into habitat and into climate resilient spaces. And we also know that it's great for us to talk about it, but it's a totally other thing to see native plant gardens and installations. And so we are increasingly installing native plant gardens throughout the state of Maine. And the photo you're looking at right here is at the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association store in downtown Freeport, where we're installing with a whole bunch of volunteers a native garden. And you can see LL Bean's canoes and kayaks in the background. So we're really looking for places where we can show people, lots and lots and lots of people, what it means to garden with native plants. So that's a little bit about us. And now let's talk about why you're all here, which is how we need to build biodiverse and climate resilient yards. That there is so much opportunity for us to start thinking differently about how we interact with the landscape. So why do we need this? Well, first off, because our climate is changing. You cannot have gone through this super, super rainy July and not pause to think, this is really different than what we've experienced before. I was camping this weekend up in the White Mountains, and to see sand on the campsite where we have camped for a number of years, way up high over where the river was, just gave us this really stark image to how much our climate is changing, what these big weather events are doing, those floods that we've been having. Last summer, we had a massive drought. So similar July, or both July, totally different experiences. Things are changing and they're changing fast. And it is really critical for us to respond. Now, I will talk more about how native plants, they are not going to stop climate change. So I just want to be really clear and open and honest about that. But what planting native plants and changing the way we manage our landscapes can do is to create resilient ecosystems, healthy landscapes, biodiverse communities where we are in the best position to try and face the change that is coming. We know that our landscaping priorities are completely out of balance. So right now, when you think of a garden outside of a building or in front of your home in some places, often we're thinking about gardens for decorative value. You know, at my house, we've got plants planted along the buffer between my house and my neighbor's house, so I can screen out some of the stuff that's going there. I'm planting, you know, beautiful red maple tree in my garden, which is this focal point that draws people's eyes in. But what we recognize and what we all need to stop and pause and think, oh my gosh, we're landscaping for us. That's what it is. It's about, what do I find beautiful? What helps me to be in the environment that I want? And what is giving me joy? And I really want to challenge everyone to think about different perspectives on the landscape. Now, I promise you, whatever it is that you care about, native plants are going to be the answer. So that's like my spoiler alert for the rest of this presentation, that all of the different things that we want to accomplish in our community in order to build resilient climate and healthy ecosystems can come down to the common denominator of native plants. Native plants are absolutely going to help us to shade sunny spots and as a result, cool the earth. Native plants are going to absolutely create habitat for all different types of creatures, us included. Native plants can help us to manage erosion on, you know, waterside banks or on steep slopes. If we think about Portland and the big slope on the west end, if there weren't native plants there, if there weren't trees there, think of how much dirt was going to end up down at the bottom of that hill. And native plants are going to be really critical in helping us to manage healthy soils and water health. They're going to create rain gardens or rain basins that are going to collect water and filter it so that not all of the things that are being flowed down through, especially these torrential rains, make it into our water systems or into the groundwater. So what do I mean when I talk about a native plant? Here at Wild Seed Project, we use this definition. Native plants are an indigenous plant that occurs naturally in a particular region, ecosystem, and habitat, and importantly, has co-evolved with the region's animals, insects, amphibians, bacteria, and fungi. Usually, those plants have grown here prior to colonization, to European colonization. I really also think it's important for us to recognize that this whole concept of a native plant is a colonizer mindset. So often the idea of native or non-native has to do with when Europeans showed up in this land. And so I do, you know, we're going to talk about native plants with that context, but for us, it's really that co-evolution that is the critical part. It is the plants that are being interdependent and interreliant on the animals and the insects, the bacteria, the fungi, all of those different living beings that are here on this planet. And people are also part of that. We know that indigenous people have lived here on this land for millennia, and our native plants have co-evolved with those individuals, and they have been managed by indigenous folks, by Wabanaki folks since the beginning. And so that's a really critical thing for us to always remember, because the big question that we like to ask here at Wild Seed Project, which I don't have the answer, is who does get to decide what is native? And whose perspectives are being centered in that conversation. So I offer this not as the point for us to kind of build off of in the rest of this presentation, but as you think about and as you interpret the way that you're interacting with your landscape, just always be asking yourself, whose perspectives are being considered in this work. And especially, as the city approaches this, I think that's always a really, really helpful thing for us to do. I'm privileged to serve as a select board member in the town of North Yarmouth, much smaller community than the city of Portland. However, it's a question that I bring to all of our conversations about conservation and about the landscape. So why do we care about native plants? I already showed that lead a little bit, but the reality is native plants play critical roles in all different parts of our ecosystem. The thing that we see the most is their supportive pollinators and their providing of habitat. We also see how they're helping with erosion. Again, big rains, like not much snow, drought periods, all those different kinds of things. Native plants are going to be able to help us to navigate that. They're not going to be as resource needy as plants that are not native to this environment. But native plants also do a ton of other things. So they are sequestering carbon in their root systems and in their plants themselves. They are cleaning the air as much as they can. We also are able to watch them absorb huge amounts of water with their deep, deep roots. And they grow food. So many of our native plants are edible plants, and that is a really exciting part of the native plant world. And we know that we have an increasing challenge around some of our really aggressive invasive plants across the city and across the state of Maine. And many native plants are our best line of defense in the face of increasing invasives. We know when we pull invasives and we don't replace them with anything, we just get more invasive plants. So native plants are providing this great opportunity for us to have something that we're pulling and replacing with another. So here's the bulk of what we're going to talk about today, which is simple action steps for you to get more native plants into your landscape and to change some of your actions. So first, we're going to talk about how you change your maintenance plan. So you can see what's already growing and you really get this opportunity. This is for you to choose to change who's centered within your landscape. We're going to talk about planting native species as critical for building habitat, biodiversity, and climate resilience. We're going to talk about ways you can get creative and using all different types of spaces. I know so often people think about landscaping and gardening as something that people do who don't live in the city. And I promise you that there's so much you can do with native plants in urban environments as well. And most importantly, in my mind, is this opportunity to collaborate with others, to think about wildlife corridors, to think about activism and advocacy that you can do in partnership with your city and in partnership with your neighbors. All right, so let's start. Changing your maintenance plan. Let's see what's already growing. We remember our landscape priorities are totally out of balance. And this is our opportunity to think about what goes on that other side. How do we balance this out with focusing on the rest of the creatures that live in this world? How do we think about balancing this out with positive impacts for our environment and really work to take ourselves out of the center of the built landscape? So we really, really need to make a change. This is as close as I'm going to get to pleading in this conversation, but it really is just so critical. We have to address the way that we are working within our built landscapes. So, absolutely preserving forests, preserving meadows, waterside, all of those things, these conservation spaces, natural spaces that are not managed by humans in the intensive way are important. What we're going to talk about today is actually the places where we have disrupted that environment and made some changes and created what we call the built landscape. So that is the gardens in front of our house where it was all dug up and then got planted and filled with soil. That is the hill strips in between the the hill strips in between the sidewalk and the road. That is our backyards, if our backyards were parking lots before. That is all of those different spaces that we as humans have disrupted and now built into something that has some living element to it. We get to change how we interact with that. I want to remember and encourage you all to decenter yourselves from the landscape. If all we're doing is pleasing us, pleasing the things that I think are beautiful, we're going to prioritize things like pristine leaves that don't have bites out of them. We're going to prioritize sexually dysfunctional plants that have big, big blooms, but can't actually use those blooms to reproduce as they are intended. We are going to prioritize often really showy non-native plants because we think they're pretty and because they make us smile. And you don't have to not do that, but I also want to encourage you to recognize that you're not the only ones who use that landscape, and that there are creatures that rely on the plants, and that the plants themselves have value and opportunity to be beautiful themselves if they are native plants. They can do all of the things, not just serving us. I'm going to start you off with the most important question, in my opinion, which is, do I actually need a lawn? I'm, gonna pause here for a second to really encourage you to think about that. Lawns are taking over our landscapes, and lawns really do come from an old concept that wealth was demonstrated by having unproductive landscapes. So when you think about big European manor houses that have those vast lawn expanses, those were signs of privilege and wealth because they didn't need to farm them. And they had the ability and the staff and the time to manage them and to make them look pristine. So we definitely use lawns. You saw a picture of my daughter. She is an avid soccer player. There is a massive soccer goal up in my backyard on my lawn. But I do ask the question, how much lawn do I need? So what I want to challenge you to do is focus on the lawn that you need based on what you do, and not the lawn that our kind of made up views of what a front yard should look like or a backyard should look like dictate. So I really want to push you to think about that. One of the best things that you can do, and you can start today, is just keep a mental note and a mental list about how much of your yard do you actually use? What are you doing in your lawn? What is happening there? Are there spaces that you never ever touch? All right, so prioritize those pieces to get rid of them and to shift that part and keep the parts that you actually do need. I think there would be a family revolt if I got rid of our full lawn because, otherwise soccer would be happening in the house. So we need to have some of that space, but do we need it all? You have an opportunity to really think differently about what that landscape can look like. You can take the monoculture, non-productive lawn space and change it around and make it look beautiful and make it a space that you want to spend time in with a little bit of creativity, a little bit of elbow grease and dirty hands. And, I always have dirt under my fingernails because it is this like constant practice of thinking about, all right, so what am I doing here? What can I bring in? How can I create a space that works for me and for everything around me? So it was brief, but hopefully I convinced you to think a little bit less about all the lawn that you have. And I want to encourage you to think about letting it go. Let it go in some parts and see what grows up. We certainly did this in big parts of our yard. We let our lawn grow and we got amazing ferns coming up in some of our shadier, damper spaces in our lawn. And those were the spaces that were always tough to have lawn grass in anyway. So we've let the ferns go and to take up part of that space. And I'll tell you, I get so much more joy out of seeing those ferns and that really lush area than I ever did seeing it as just plain old lawn. So I encourage you to let your lawn go for a little while. Often we're hearing people doing a no-mow May. You can do a no-mow May and no-mow June, and see what kind of things are blooming and what's growing up, and then edit around that. You know, mow around the black-eyed Susans that are popping up in one spot. It's totally fun. And you could even then say, all right, well, this is my little black-eyed Susan garden, and put up a little bit of space around it so it becomes a garden space. Let the lawn and the plants there dictate where you're going to go. Listen to them instead of forcing them to do what you want. When you decide what you don't want, if you have a small yard and a small lawn, I would really encourage you to take a sheet mulching approach. It's super easy. Take all of those cardboard boxes that are piling up from at-home deliveries, take off all of the staples and the tape, and lay them down, and then cover it with soil. So if we can put down all of that cardboard, we can cover it with soil, and then we can cover it with some type of mulch, and leave it there. It's going to kill the lawn grass underneath and make a really wonderful space for you to plant directly into. If you don't want to plant into it right away, covering it up with mulch and then a healthy layer of wood chips, or like playground chips, as I guess we call them here in Maine, is a great way to hold that space without worrying about the weeds popping up in different spaces. The next thing I want to encourage you to do is to stop using synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. Now, I know that the city of Portland has a Landcare ordinance, and I would really encourage everyone to read that and follow that. It is such a critical thing for us to do. Especially pesticides are very, very harmful for our plants, insects, small birds, mammals, all of those, and us, all of the different types of creatures that are living within the landscape. And if you're using pesticides and synthetic fertilizers in your plants, they stay in those plants forever. Sometimes, and for quite a long time for others. We have this opportunity to recognize that a little bit of a nibble around a leaf is actually okay, because it's showing that there is life happening there, that it's not just something that's for us, but that creatures are also engaging with the plants that we're putting out there. So again, shift your mindset, think about differently about what is beautiful. Is beautiful just the big, bold flower, or is beautiful the plant and animal interactions that are happening? I want to encourage you to think differently about pesticides and fertilizers, to follow the rules in Portland, and to help us to restore balance and biodiversity. The next thing I want to encourage you to do is leave your leaves, which I know, I totally know is a stressful, hard thing to do. But one of our colleagues often says, you don't have too many leaves, you have too much lawn. And I think that that is a really important frame for us. You know, forests, they drop their trees, drop their leaves, and those leaves go to build up a living soil. They insulate plant roots, and they create all different places for birds and other creatures to feed off of and to overwinter. So I really encourage you to leave as much of the leaves as you can. I always do in my flower gardens. I have not mowed many of our spaces in our yard for years, and I have some of the healthiest soil that I possibly could. Leaves do break up. You really, really need to pack up your leaves best to leave them, but if you can't leave them just as they are, you should consider mulching them instead of just getting rid of them. As much as you can use them to help insulate shrubs and trees over the winter. You can fill them into new garden spaces and use that as the thick mulch that you're putting over those cardboard and some of that soil. You have so much opportunity to use leaves to your advantage instead of seeing them as the enemy. All of our species, so many of our species use the leaf litter for the winter to survive. I think we've all probably had that experience of being inside, being a kid, jumping into a leaf pile, going all the way down to the bottom and finding something creepy crawly that lives underneath there, or in the spring, pulling away some of those wet leaves on the edges of gardens and finding whether it's salamanders or caterpillars or even some ground nesting bees. Identifying species, there are so many identified species that use and critically rely on the leaf litter, and it's a wonderful reason to leave it because you're going to have so much more life going on in your garden. And then I encourage you to also leave your stems. We talk a lot about putting our gardens to bed. It's something that we've been trained to do. It often comes from, again, this perspective on like what is neat and clean and organized. But the reality is if you leave your stems, especially the pithy hollow stems, creatures are going to drill little holes inside of them and live in those spaces protected over the winter. And if you leave the seed heads of your plants, you're going to see birds. It's better than a bird feeder. You're going to see them all throughout the year. You can be creative, making piles of sticks, doing interesting things. I love this image of all of the sticks created into a nice snake or stacked in really beautiful ways. You know, it doesn't mean you have to leave it exactly and have it look messy to you. Just change a little bit on how you can think about, be creative, and how you can incorporate that into your landscapes. And my last point here around changing your maintenance plan is encouraging you to leave dead trees. One of the best examples of this is actually in Deering Oaks Park, where for many years there's been a big old tree stump where creatures live inside. They provide food for birds who are pecking into the wood to begin or to get different insects that are living there. They provide habitat, all different types of things. So if you can, leave your trees, cut down the dangerous parts of it, but leave a quite tall space, which is called a snag, for creatures to live within. This helps us to support all of these different actions, help us to support full animal life cycles. Flowers do a great job of providing nectar and pollen, but we also need to make sure that we're supporting the caterpillars, the eggs that are being laid on there, creating spaces for caterpillars to go into chrysalis and to come back out as butterflies or moths. We have an opportunity to think broader than just what are we providing for our adult pollinators as they're going through. We can identify all the different stages of critter life cycles and make sure that our landscapes are available to them. All right. I'm going to go next, and that was the heavier part of our presentation, and we're going to go a little bit faster as we go down. It's like a nice boulder rolling downhill. So we've talked about different ways to think about our landscape. Then we need to figure out what we're going to populate it with. And I want to encourage you to plant native species so you can build habitat, biodiversity, and climate resilience. First thing, the most critical thing is I want you to think about all different layers. We're going to grow flowers, and I think a lot of us, when we think about gardening, that's the first place that we go. But I also absolutely want to encourage you to grow shrubs and trees. We're going to hit all the different layers of the landscape. So when you're planting flowers, native plants with beautiful native flowers do exist. All right. Native plants can be garden plants. They provide bold colors. We've got obedient plant, this purplish plant on the left, which is super cool because it actually twists itself to move towards the sun. We've got swamp milkweed here in the middle that's providing big, beautiful colors, so fascinating, and so many creatures rely on it. And even things like daisy fleabane, where this bumblebee is collecting pollen, are great examples. And often we think about, especially the fleabane, which is a type of aster, we think about those as like undesirable weeds within our garden. But I want to encourage you to embrace all of the different flowers and all the different plants that are growing, because those are really providing critical pollinator fodder. And I know that you had a pollinator class earlier in this series, and I would encourage everyone to watch that and to explore what are the different types of native plants that can support all different types of pollinators that you're excited about. You have this opportunity to say, I love hummingbirds, so let me plant plants. I apologize, everyone. Our office building is getting a wonderful mowing right now. We should get them to do less lawn. So hopefully it's not too noisy in the background. So if hummingbirds are something that you're really excited about, think about putting aside the sugar water and think about the plants that are going to feed hummingbirds, whether it's scarlet bee balm, which is a super fun plant that I have throughout my garden, cardinal flower, which is a beautiful version of lobelias, and trumpet honeysuckle, which is one of these native vines that is just stunning. All of these are great because of their red color. The hummingbirds are going to come more naturally to them. And so you have this opportunity to say, you know what? I really want to see more hummingbirds. Let me plant intentionally for them. Or so many of us do this around monarchs. I want to see more monarchs in my garden. I want to support them. And so I'm going to plant milkweeds of all different kinds in my garden landscape. I promise you, if you plant it, the creatures will come, but I want to warn you that it might take a little while for them to get there. My favorite example of this is that our founder, Heather McCargo, who is an amazing horticulturist, moved into the West End in Portland and immediately started creating a large meadow space in her backyard and planted what, when I go there, looks like hundreds and hundreds of different species of native plants in one of the most, to me, spectacular examples of a backyard native plant garden in an urban space that we can find. And it took a few years. It took some time for the creatures to show up because there wasn't a pathway for them to get there. They weren't just in the area and flew over and saw. They needed to be able to go from point to point to point in order to make her house and her garden part of their lifetime journey. And so when you do plant it, you may be so lucky to have pollinators and other creatures show up the very next day, but if they don't panic and don't pull up the plants, but make a shift and be patient. If gardeners know anything, it is how to slow down and to be patient and to wait and to know that the big payoff is coming. So plant your flowers. That's where we all start. We really want to encourage you to plant shrubs as well. So shrubs are really that in-between space, and certainly in urban environments, they are so helpful in screening our neighbors so that we have living fences and living hedges in between spaces. So many of our shrubs have edible plants, whether it's elderberries or blueberries. I have a hazelnut shrub that I'm growing at my home. And if I can get like 4 hazelnuts before the squirrels, I feel awesome about it. But so much opportunity for us to think about our landscape also providing us food as well as creatures food. And shrubs, and especially the dense thicket that shrubs make, creates a wonderful space for creatures to hide in. You'll see a huge number of birds, especially nesting within shrubs all around our landscapes. And it's really important for us to plant trees. So Doug Ptolemy is a very well-known scientist who's an entomologist and focuses on native plant and animal relationships. And this data is from Doug's book, Bringing Nature Home. And I would encourage everyone to read that if you haven't already. And what we know is that native species of trees support huge, huge numbers of species of butterflies and moths, as well as all different types of creatures. So planting oaks and willows and cherries, birches, and even poplars, you are going to be supporting and creating a foundation for an entire habitat of multiple different species who are living out their entire life cycles within those trees. So trees are great for creatures. Trees are also really wonderful for us. They're going to add a huge amount of biomass to the landscape right away. They're going to store carbon. They're going to help to clean the air. And in cities especially, planting trees along pavements and along roadsides is going to create much, much needed shade. And, you know, Mainers, we don't love being hot all the time, and shade trees is a really important part of our process. All right. So, all right. Hopefully I've sold you on native plants, and now you got to figure out where you're going to get them. We really encourage people to sow their own seeds for native plants. So it is much more cost effective. It's easy to do. You can do it in your own backyard or on your porch or your stoop. But I also know that sometimes we want to buy the plants that are already grown instead of waiting the year or more for those plants to start to germinate and grow. And so I encourage you to visit our website, which is wildseedproject.net, and use our whole process. We help you to figure out how to buy native plants, where to buy them all around the state, and some tips for talking to some of the bigger nurseries about what are the practices that they're using. Are they using pesticides? What kind of fertilizers are they using? Are they doing clones and cuttings, which is going to give you identical plants, or are they growing plants from seed? And just a quick aside, that growing plants from seed is going to be one of the most important ways to build up climate resilience, because you're going to have genetic diversity that hopefully some of the plants that you're growing or that you're planting are able to deal with some of the extreme weather environments that we're having. So, you know, this July is a perfect example. It has been so wet. If you planted 100 plants that really like it dry, and they were all identical, and that genetic makeup could not tolerate the amount of rain that we had, they'd all be dead. If instead you planted 100 plants that weren't clones of each other, but that all had 100 different sets of genetic makeup, it's possible that a good number of those plants, while some would die because they couldn't handle the very wet that we had, some would make it through. So the more that we can do to put plants in the ground that we know have been grown from seed, the stronger and more resilient our landscapes are going to be. So I really encourage you to consider sowing native seeds. We can teach you how to do that. We have a free demos on our website, and we can provide seeds for you. But really, this is just a practice of mimicking what nature is already doing. Also, for those of you who are vegetable gardeners, this is an awesome thing to do in the off season. So we sow native plants in the winter. We legit put them in pots on like January 1st or December 25th, put them in pots, stick them outside, let them get snowed on, let them deal with the weather, all the different things that happen outside in the winter and the spring. Then we manage them on, and we actually plant them in the fall. So it's a totally different cycle, and for me provides a really wonderful like plant boost in the dead of winter when I'm really feeling that hole in my life. And we'll share with the city some of the resources on how to do that, so that they can share that with all of you. All right, so We know we're going to change how we're managing our landscapes. We are going to plant lots and lots and lots of native plants, many of them from seed, and we're going to get creative. So here is our opportunity to use all of our spaces to do it year round so that we can support the full life cycles of pollinators and other creatures. I want to really encourage you to break out of the norm. So right here is a picture of the sundial lupin, which is Maine's only native lupin. If you drive on the highway, if you drive past almost any roadside throughout the state of Maine, you are going to be seeing the invasive western lupin. And I know Miss Rumphius encouraged all of us to plant as many of those as we can. They're gorgeous plants. And they're outcompeting the native sundial lupin, which no longer exists in the wild. And so I really want to encourage you to just pause in some of the places where you think, oh, this is the way it's always done. This is such a Maine thing to do, and think differently about ways that you can incorporate plants into your landscape and ask the questions. If I'm seeing it all over the roadside, should it be there? And what do we do with that? The sundial lupin is harder to grow, and I'm not telling you to totally ditch your lupins. They are absolutely stunning. And think about, instead of putting in big purple lupins, maybe you can put in some of the big purple asters that might fill that same desire for beautiful purples, but not outcompete some of the native plants that we have. I want to encourage you to create more spaces. These are all pictures taken in the city of Portland, whether it's, house sides with a small trellis that then become a full vine beauty of honeysuckle planters. These are wild strawberries in this planter that have the most delicious, very tiny strawberries, so much better, in my opinion, than some of the cultivated ones. Think about native plants in your planter boxes, in pots on your stoop, and think about planting around all of the trees that we have out in the city of Portland. If there's open grass or if there's open dirt, we can throw some plant seeds in there, some native seeds, and to see what comes up. We encourage you to think about what we call stack packing and layering. So really cram those spaces full of life. We don't like to see mulch volcanoes and gardens where there's like a plant and it's surrounded by dark mulch, and then another plant and surrounded by dark mulch, where you actually see way more mulch than you do plants. Native plants, our founder, Heather McCargo, talks about them as teenagers. They really love to be in a pack. They love to be together. So let's let them live their best lives and be their best selves, and put them tightly together with all different types of plants, and to create that really biodiverse environment for creatures to thrive. And again, I'm going to bring you back to my key point here, which is redefining beauty. There are so many amazing native plants that are garden worthy. You can add in different types of goldenrods, which are not the thing that you're allergic to. That is ragweed, promise. Lots of different types of asters have some of the biggest, boldest colors. You can put those into our gardens and you will just see the extended beauty. And bonus, the asters and goldenrods that are native to Maine, they're late bloomers. And so they're going to be blooming all the way through into the fall. They're going to extend the opportunity for fodder and food for pollinators, and bonus, extend the beauty of big flowers in our gardens for us. So last but not least, I want to encourage you to collaborate with others. I want you to think about creating wildlife corridors, to think about being advocates for native plants. This is our vision and our opportunity to create a landscape priority list that balances out. I'm not saying completely erase putting us in this balance, but balances out what we want with what the environment wants and needs. We have this opportunity again to level that field, level that balance, and to create landscapes that do it all. The best part about this is you don't have to pick and choose. We have been picking and choosing, and we've been picking us, but now we have this opportunity to do something that's good for all of us. So remember, we can transform what we're doing, not only in the places where we live, but the places where we work and where we patronize. We can make massive difference in spaces that, I mean, I'm much more likely to go into a store where this is out front. Granted, I'm me and I love plants and I love native gardens, but I mean, it just feels so much more inviting. I want to encourage you to join local efforts. I know that the city of Portland has been doing a ton, and right next door, the city of South Portland has been running this 100 Resilient Yards program, which has been really amazing. It is massively ambitious, and it's a demonstration of what we can do if we all band together and use some creativity and come up with new ideas to really push the envelope on what does it mean to have a yard? What does it mean to tend open spaces? And so I'm excited about that. And I'm excited about where the city of Portland will take this, this type of idea and run with it as well. I want to encourage you to create wildlife corridors, work together with your neighbors. Now, a number of years ago, Wild Seed Project created a Portland pollinator vision plan, which will also make sure is made available and shared. You can find it on our website. But it's a really wonderful resource looking at the city of Portland to see where are these corridors, where are the opportunities for green spaces to bring plants and the species that rely on them all throughout the city, to get them from the more suburban areas off peninsula, and to also make available spaces and corridors within the peninsula itself. And I want to encourage you, this is my selfish plug, I guess, to invest in local initiatives. Wild Seed Project is right in your backyard. Right now, what you're looking at is the mock-ups of our new native seed center, which will be at Turkey Hill Farm in Cape Elizabeth, so just south of the city. And our office is just north of the city in North Yarmouth. And we're really excited to be working collectively with folks on the things that we bring to the table, which is often seeds and plants and education, and to create amazing opportunities and partnerships like us being here and talking with the city. So my final note is to encourage all of you to be part of the native plant movement, to think about what are you going to plant, how much of your lawn are you going to get rid of, and what's going to go in your little planter outside your front door. Think about doing things differently. Think about decentering yourself from your garden priorities, and plant more native plants. All right, so thanks so much. I am happy to answer. I think we have just a few minutes, 5-7 minutes for any kind of questions, but Emma, if you want to kind of move us through that, we can jump in.
Yeah, of course. I think it will be best if people just raise their hands and then we'll call on them, and you can keep your camera off and just unmute yourself if that works. And we'll try and get through as many as we can. Tim, I see your hand up first. You want to unmute yourself? Timothy?
It looks like you're muted.
No, we still can't hear you. Oh, we'll try Bernard.
Hi, just would you be able to put in a link or when you send out a note later, the Portland landscape ordinance link, the website link?
Yes, of course. Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll send out an email to the to all the participants after this, and I'll include all of the links that we've mentioned and a link to our website, which also has the past recordings of the other 2 webinars we've had this summer. So I'll send that out after.
Thank you.
See Susan.
Hi, this has been a great talk. I had a quick question about the snags, and I was
Mhm.
wondering how high, how much tree should you retain so it's safe but effective for the critters that want to live in it?
That's really going to depend on where it is. You know, if it's very close to your house or if it's close to a power line or a road, you're going to want it to be shorter, you know, in a distance where I think about at the end of my driveway, I live on a state road, and the end of my driveway, I have a hemlock who's got the hemlock woolly adelgid infestation, and the tree is slowly dying. And we are talking about exactly that question. How much of the tree can we leave that if it fell down, it wouldn't block the road and it wouldn't take out the power lines that currently it definitely would. You know, in nature, in the forest, the leaving the whole tree is best. And so thinking about, you know, do you need to limb it up so that those branches don't fall? And then after that, what is the safest height that it's not going to impact some part of your property, a fence, a power line, a road, is really the key there. So there's no exact answer to that. It's really thinking about the exact space where it is and what you can do with it.
Great, thank you.
Stuart, do you want to go next?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I didn't exactly hear your question, but I'm very interested in all of this. I'm working hard to build a pollinator habitat. I happen to be in Massachusetts, and I go to every one of these that I can because the invasives are just killing me. Now, I cleared another section of my property because it goes at an elevation slant and it was blocking the solar. And I'm one of those people who believes in solar, although I'm a tree hugger too, but I had to choose. And the invasives have just come in particular, which I don't know if you have there, is Japanese knotweed, which is to me a worldwide scourge, what I can read. And the other one now is porcelain berries. And not wanting to use poisons and not wanting, I mean, it's almost, I don't have the budget to do as much work as it's going to take to pull every single one of these by hand. So if you have any suggestions, I'm open to them. Thank you.
Yes. I'm echoing on somebody's. So if folks who aren't speaking, yeah, if you could mute, that'd be great. Thank you. So we will send out certainly a link to an article we have about replacing invasives with native plants that can be really helpful. But one of the best things that you can do is to cut down those Japanese knotweed, but then smother it with black plastic. Now, there is no there's no perfect answer to the Japanese knotweed question. Often we see if you cut it down, it comes back stronger. We do see a lot of our conservation partners actually trying to figure out how some type of organic pesticide organic herbicide can be used to manage knotweed growths, but it's not ideal. Again, there's no perfect answer. There are some native shrubs that will do a nice job of competing in smaller areas, especially ones that are going to have large leaves so that they're going to totally shade out any population of knotweed or some other really pesky invasives. We have seen success in small areas with things like purple flowering raspberry, which has kind of large oak leaf sized, shaped and sized leaves, and that those will create such a dense thicket essentially that it shades out the knotweed, but it's still an ongoing process. You can't just set that and forget it. You got to be out there managing on a regular basis. I would try like some heavy black plastic, cut it down, heavy black plastic it, and try and bake it as best you can. But it is going to be just kind of an ongoing challenge, unfortunately. But I'll make sure that we share out our resources on managing invasives with native plants.
If I may address what you just said to me. Okay, first of all, I'm looking at the area where my knotweed is, and our total property is 4 acres,
Mhm.
much of it treed. And now where I cut down the trees, it's growing back, which I'm planning to leave, just keep the heights reduced so they don't block the solar. But unfortunately, I don't think I can treat my knotweed that way. I mean, where I live in Western Mass, you can drive all around and you can see just monocultures of them. I don't have that. And one thing I've done over the 10 years is I've attempted to pull them on a monthly basis. I walk through the property, I deal with the briars and short pants and stuff, and I pull every knotweed I see. Unfortunately, I get busy and then I haven't done it every month. So that's one thing. I've also seen, which wouldn't work for me either because of the fact that they're spread out, because what I have is like plantings all through, but no monocultures yet. Because
That's great.
The other thing is that you might have, you didn't mention this, but it's like the plastic. I had read you could take sheets of metal that are small enough that the knotweed comes through and it strangles itself.
Interesting.
One thing I wanted to try, which maybe you'd comment on, and then I'm done, I think, is someone, and I didn't get to do it this year, someone said vinegar. And I thought, well, maybe what I do is get my backpack sprayer and I go up and I spray vinegar, which seems not to be really harmful to the environment, and try that on the little plants. But unfortunately, I didn't make it there this year. So what do you?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I can't speak to whether that particular tactic would work. I think the long and short of it is a lifelong journey that we are going to be on with Japanese knotweed and a number of other invasive plants. And I think figuring out how to do our best in the ways that you are to keep it under control. We're not going, the goal of eradication is just not practical, especially in spaces where it is just everywhere. Even if you get it out of one space, it's going to pop back up again in a different space or from a different space. And so testing out and trying the things that we see and then share it back with the group if and when you have success, I think is the best way to do this. This is why we need to be in community in doing this work, because we need to be able to share when we have success, what it looks like, and help to show others how to make it happen, and to help other people recognize that, like, yes, the pollinators like the Japanese knotweed flowers, and that's not enough of a reason for us to keep it there. There are so many things that it's not doing that make it the challenge. And so, talking with our neighbors is probably one of the best ways to work on eradication, because we're all going to need to be doing it all the time.
Good. Well, thank you very much. And let me just say that I don't know if you noticed, but lifetime is almost over for me, so I got to hurry. Bye.
Take care.
Okay, well, we've kind of run out of time, but you are all welcome if you have more questions to send an email back to us. I'm going to send out an email right when we get off with a link to all the resources that we mentioned, and you can reply to that email and send questions. Or Wild Seed Project also has an info contact on their website.
May I just jump in with a quick thing about the Japanese knotweed that I'd just like to leave everybody with, because I have a solution for Japanese knotweed, but it is going to take a collaborative effort. I'm a natural dyer, and knotweed root makes a beautiful dye. And I am constantly trying to get at these roots. I mean, it needs to be excavated. So if there was a way that we could think about excavating the roots, I don't think we can eradicate knotweed, and some knotweed I think is good. It's actually kind of beautiful if it's not overtaking and invasive, but using it for naturally dyeing textiles is, I think, a great solution, but it is going to require a lot more collaborative efforts. So I just wanted to jump in with that. Thank you. This has been a great time.
Thank you. And I'll just end with one of the beauties of the foraging community is that often with invasive plants, often with native plants, it's a hard thing to only forage a small amount, take a very small percentage, leave the rest. foragers who are foraging native invasive plants like knotweed, take it all. Take the shoots to make rhubarb style desserts, take the roots for dye, do what you want, take them for cuttings, for inside gardens, or inside bouquets. Do what you can, and if we all do our part, we can try and get it somewhat under control. But thanks everyone. Thanks so much for having me. And let us know if you have any questions. You can reach out to us through our website.
Thank you all again for coming. We'll post this on our website if you'd like to share it, and I'll send a link and an email with all those resources shortly after. Thank you.
Great. Thanks everyone.